Hi, I've been having some problems with Godot with camera jittering, and I want to talk about the problems I've had, some workarounds I've found, and discuss some ways that Godot might improve. To start with, I'll start Godot 4.3, which came out a week or so ago, I think. I'm going to start a new minimal project to demonstrate this problem. Starting with a blank folder, I'll create a camera jitter demo. Start with a 2D scene. Add a couple sprites. One of the sprites will have a camera that follows it. One sprite will be a background. One sprite will be a, let's just call it a character. And the character will move. Let's just use the Godot icon for both sprites. For the background, I need it to be a little bit bigger so that it can show motion. We want the character to move, so I'm going to create a minimal script here that will allow some player control over the movement. Very limited control. We'll just say if key input.isKey pressed if the space key is pressed. So whenever the space key is pressed, we'll just change the global position and move it to the left and up. So here's a minimal script that allows the player to have limited control over the movement of the sprite, but it is at least some control, and it's enough for this demo. I also want to be able to see the individual pixels, so I'm going to change several settings. The first is to render pixels, so I'll come in here to Settings, Rendering Textures. The default texture filter I want to be nearest. That will draw pixels instead of blending them all together. Another thing I want to change is my window resolution. I want the viewport to be small, like 400 by 300. And I want the viewport resolution to be small, but I want the window itself to be drawn large, so I'll just do 4 times those values. For the window width override, I will set it to 1600 and 1200. And then I also want the window stretch mode to be viewport. This is what I was using in my other project when I began running into problems. So I think we're all set up to run this. And this first run through of the project is not going to have any problems. So we can see the sprite, the character moves across the background, everything looks good, no problems. One thing I will note is the camera is locked on, the camera is always locked exactly onto the position of the player, which doesn't always look the best. And I do want camera smoothing, so I come here to camera, I turn on position smoothing, and I'll just leave it at the default 5 pixels a second. And that's where I saw the first problems in my other project. You'll see that if I set it up like this, when the character stops, it will not stay put. It keeps moving relative to the background. It wiggles on the background. Of course, when the character stops, I want it to just stop and stay put on the background, not wiggle back and forth. So in this setup, a problem we're having is that the character wiggles relative to the background, but the sprite itself has no jitters, and the sprite itself looks okay. So that's the first problem I encountered. And I solved it by coming in here to project settings. And if you go to rendering 2D, there's this option, snap 2D transforms to pixel. It looks like there's some expected issues because one of those sentences says, this can lead to a crisper appearance at the cost of less smooth movement, especially when camera 2D smoothing is enabled. And I do have that enabled, so it sounds like this is a known issue, but I'm going to show what the problem I had with it was. So I will turn on this option, and I have to restart Godot for it to take effect. That tooltip says that we have to restart Godot for it to take effect. So this solves the jittering relative to the background. When the character stops, it stays put on the background. That part looks good. But a new problem is introduced, there's this horrible jitter when the character is moving. And I see that the video is capturing some of the jitter, but on my actual monitor, it's jittering extremely quickly. Like every other frame, it jumps back and forth a pixel. And so fast that it looks blurry and you almost can't even see the jittering happening. So we solved one problem and got another problem in exchange. I found a workaround for this single pixel jittering on the character by simply saying global position equals global position dot round. So here I'm manually setting the global position of the character to an integer position. And I also need to do the same thing to the camera. So I'll do that quick. Do the exact same workaround, global position equals global position dot round. So I'm setting the position of the camera to integer values and the position of the character to integer values. And so if I have that, if I have that 2D transform snap turned on, and I do that workaround with those two lines, this is the best result I've got. I don't see any problems with this. The character does not jitter relative to the background, and there is no pixel jittering while the character is moving either. So this solves the problem. This is a workaround I used. But it makes me wonder, what is the point of this setting? I do see that it did solve a problem I had, but my expectation is that this setting will set the positions to integer values. But then I also have to do the same thing in my code. So it feels to me like I'm having to do the same thing twice. I have to turn on this setting to set the positions to integer values. And then I also have to manually, in my own code, set the positions to integer values. It feels like I have to do the same thing twice, or that there's two different things doing the same job. And yet both of them are necessary in order for the code to work. One last thing I want to show is I want to show it with this turned off. So I showed that there's a problem without this setting. Then I showed that with this setting and with a workaround, things work. Now I want to show just the workaround by itself. So I want to show the workaround lines without this setting. I haven't yet shown what happens if I do that. So I turn off that setting. Again, I have to restart Godot. And again, we're going to have some problems. We're back to the first problem we had, where the character wiggles relative to the background. And the character won't just stop and stay put on the background. But in motion, the character does not have the pixel jitter like it did before. So we've seen two problems. We've seen jittering relative to the background, and we've seen like a very rapid pixel jittering of the character. And we've seen two solutions, one of them being the workaround. And so we need both of those things in our code to solve both of these problems. But again, it feels like that shouldn't be necessary. It seems to me like they're both trying to do the same thing. And for some reason, neither one of them by themselves will do the job. Both of them need to be included in the project, even though it seems like they're doing the same thing. And I don't know if this is a bug in Godot or maybe just something that hasn't been polished, but I hope maybe I can start a discussion about it, or at least demonstrate this problem. And thanks for listening. Bye.